Well, this is pretty unexpected. I don't really have a script or anything for this. We've talked about, a few times now on the podcast going through police academy and what that journey has been like. But really, since that podcast I did with Austin, back during phase 1 of FTO, haven't really done anything else on the podcast. I've been pretty busy, and it's been a wild, pretty rough time, and everybody hates FTO. I think that's just the way it goes, and that's what everybody tells you. But today was my last day of FTO. Not because I passed. I'm a solo officer now. I got into work this morning an hour early, like I usually do, and I got pulled aside and was informed that I was getting let go and released from the program. Honestly, not super shocking, based on some of the things that had gone on, especially last week. Some things happened that made me feel like, maybe this was the end of the road for me with this particular department. And really, I'm not even sure if I'm going to post this now or ever. But it did feel like it would be silly to have a podcast about real life and being authentic and documenting a journey and then not talking about something like this. I'm not going to go into specifics as far as like what led to the decision or, how I feel about how that all happened. Maybe that's something we'll talk about later on. But right now, out of respect for, the agency that I did work with and for my wife and my family, some of those details, they don't really need to be discussed right now. But I did want to at least come on here and talk about how to move forward. And that's a topic that we've talked about before on the podcast. And I think one of the weird things about today, knowing that, like I said, I've been pursuing being a police officer for 9 years now. I've had other jobs that I thought got me close and didn't quite get there. And then I worked for this department in a non-sworn position that went so well that I decided, and was encouraged that this would be the time to go for it. And I did. And academy sucked, but I'm so grateful for that opportunity. And then going from academy, I kind of thought academy was going to be the hard schedule. But the field training program is just hard to prepare for. And I love the work, love the agency, the people that I work with, love the job. But there were certain things about it that I struggled with early on, and I think that played a part. I'm certainly not done. I'm released from this agency, and that'll turn into something else, and I'll move on from there. But the real point that I'm getting at here is that I'm not upset, that I'm not scared. I almost feel bad for not being more upset about the situation. Like this last week, my wife and I had been having conversations just about how things were going at work, and that for the most part, my performance was, I was doing pretty well in most areas, but we just started to have this feeling that I wasn't fitting in the way that I thought I was going to, and what that might look like and what the future could hold for us there. And I think God just started to put on our hearts that this department, that I've worked for 2 years might not be where I stay. Wasn't really sure, what that meant, what that was going to look like, but I felt God just kind of preparing us for that. And so we even talked about it again last night. Like, hey, like, if for some reason, like, I don't think I'm going to get let go, but if for some reason that does happen, we're okay. We're going to be okay. God has always been faithful, particularly in seasons where things are very confusing and things do not go the way that we plan, which, is pretty common for not just our lives, but life in general. Life does not go the way that you plan it. In fact, afterwards, my wife even told me that she woke up in the middle of the night last night and just had this sinking feeling and felt like she knew, like, that when I went into work today, that this is what was going to happen. And she said, while I was at work, finding that out, she was doing her devotionals and God was just speaking to her about holding on to blessings and not being upset or grumbling over things that you don't have because you don't see the vision that God has for your life. And so we just talked about how we don't want to be that, we don't want to be that generation of the Israelites from the Old Testament where they wandered around keeping themselves from the blessings that God had for them because they didn't trust Him. They had a bad attitude. And that's not who we are. Obviously, being let go from a police department isn't a good feeling, especially when, I certainly never gave up, never quit trying. I love and respect the people that work at that agency. And so that's not a fun experience to get pulled into the chief's office and have to turn in all your gear and sign that paperwork. Like, nobody wants to go through that, but it is a blessing. I don't know how yet. I don't know where we're going to end up. But my life is a ministry for God. And so wherever He chooses to put us, that's where I'm going to be. And so I really just wanted to communicate beyond just the news of, hey, heads up, guys, like, I got fired. More important than that is when something like this happens, God is still good. And nothing comes as a shock to Him. Nothing is going to block His plan for your lives other than maybe you getting in your own way. So just keep a good attitude. Understand that as long as you are doing your best, showing up, being faithful to God, being obedient to Him, He will reward that. And that's not to say, I'm not going to try and say that, I was perfect and this agency had no reason to let me go and there was this huge injustice. Not going to go into any of that. The fact is that I worked for that department and I worked hard. I no longer work for that department, but I still live my life in service to God and to my family. That doesn't change. So I'm very much looking forward to what comes next. And so hopefully this is something that, well, actually, maybe hopefully it's something that you can't relate to, but if you can, great. If you have any, questions or comments about what that process is like or how to maintain an attitude of being grateful and honest and trusting God in times where it seems like you did your best and it just wasn't enough and now you're stuck going nowhere. That's not the case. So if you need somebody to reach out to about that, as always, you can message on any of the social media page, comment on the video, but reach out and know that you're not alone. Like I said, it's a good thing that happened. I just don't know why yet. And we're going to find out. So in the meantime, thanks for tuning in. I always appreciate it. On the bright side, I've got a little bit more time on my hands now, so maybe you'll see a little bit more of me until things pick up and I'm back in background investigations or some other awful experience. But thanks for watching the video, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments. Take care.